Hi everyone, Stepan here. Welcome to another Friday's middle game video. Today I'm going to discuss the importance of controlling open files and utilizing the control of open files, which is a middle game pattern or theme or something that you have to do in the middle game and something that you have to keep an eye out for in the middle game at all times. In positions where there is only one open file, the control of that file could mean the difference between winning and losing, and it could mean the difference between total activity and dominance all over the board and complete passivity, as we are going to see. I'm going to use four Grandmaster games as examples. The four games were from four different periods. I chose games from the 30s, 40s, 70s, and one recent game played by Topalov and Anand. And this is applicable in positions where there are two open files as well, but if there is only one open file, the control of it becomes even more significant. The first game we are going to start with is a game played in the 1945 USSR Championship between Botvinnik and Izak Boleslavsky. Botvinnik has the white pieces. Of course, Boleslavsky is not a weak player, but compared to Botvinnik in 1945, he is, well, he's weaker than him. Let's just say that. So in this position on move 23, Boleslavsky captured the rook on d2, which in itself is not a mistake if you see the dangers in front of you. So in this position, of course, Mikhail Botvinnik captures with the queen. If you capture with the rook, then rook to d8 equalizes immediately. So after queen takes d2, Botvinnik is now controlling the open d file, and the open d file is the main battlefield in this position. You could argue that the g7 bishop is a bad piece, but that piece is about to open up somehow, either after f5, which is very aggressive, or after the rook moves and the bishop comes to f8, or maybe even after h6, bishop h6, h5, bishop h6. So the control of the open d file is significant, but it's not a practical advantage. Why? Because there are no infiltration points in the position. As you can see, all the squares are covered. And the fact that white is controlling the open d file is aesthetically pleasing, but doesn't give him any practical advantage and doesn't give him a move he can play to utilize that theoretical advantage. So let's see what happened. In this position, Boleslavsky decided to trade the bishops off. Now watch what happens. Bishop takes b3. A takes b3, fine. Ruining white's pawn structure slightly, I could say insignificantly, because these three pawns are still able to parry these three and able to hold them, so black isn't able to create passed pawn. What it gives white, this exchange, is it gives him additional support of the c4 square, so the c pawn could advance forward and be defended. And in this position, believe it or not, black makes a blunder which almost ruins his position immediately. After black's next move, the position is almost strategically winning for white. Black plays the seemingly logical queen to e6, attacking the b3 pawn, but this move stops doing something that was very important in this position. What does it do? Well, if we try to infiltrate on one of these three squares as white, which is what we would love to do with our queen and rook, because that would highlight our advantage of controlling the open d file, then we need to remove the defenders. The main defender of the only square that can be infiltrated for now, because the queen is the first one in the line, so we cannot go queen to d8. The main piece that's defending is the b6 knight. The b6 knight is controlling the d7 square. So which move do we play to reduce the pressure on b3 and to dislodge this knight? We play the move c4. Now, why is the move queen e6 bad? Before the move queen e6, the black queen was controlling the pawn on b4. So if you play c4 here as white, well, then it's not that easy to continue, because white's queen is tied down and you need to be slightly more careful. This move is very superficial. Okay, a good move in this position would have been just rook e8, supporting your pawn, and of course the knight is still keeping defense here, and you are solid. White doesn't have an easy way to continue this position. If you start going crazy with c4, c5, then eventually black is going to have significant counterplay. But the move queen e6 just allows a very easy c4, and now the queen is free to move. After bishop f6, what was the idea of queen to e6, trying to read out the bishop? The move c5 dislodges the knight to c8, and now a very simple queen infiltration to d7. And now already white has a huge advantage. So after queen to d7, you are of course sacrificing your pawn on b3, or better said, you are trading your b3 pawn for the b7 pawn. So white, well, wants this trade to happen. Black doesn't really have such a good move in this position. Queen takes b3 was played in the game. A better try is queen to e7. It was a bit more resistant, but after queen takes e7, knight takes e7, rook to d7, this is still crushing. Let's say rook to b8, defending the pawn, and now you have a very, very simple winning move, knight to c4, with two ideas. First idea, win the e5 pawn. Second idea, jump into d6, win the b7 pawn, and win the game. Of course, in this position, you would just take the e5 pawn first. That's simple. But in the game, after queen d7, queen takes b3 was played, and now queen takes b7, and you can see that black's pieces are not communicating. They are not defending each other. Black, of course, has two terminal weaknesses on a6 and c6, and the game was won easily by Botvinnik in the next 10 or so moves. You can see the whole game on chessgames.com. Just Google Botvinnik Boleslavsky 1945, and you will see the whole game. So after a takes b3, as I said, an improvement for black is rook e8, which isn't an active move, but white is controlling the open file, and there's not much you can do. You don't have to go crazy if you are worse. You can just keep solid. Okay. Now let's move on to our next game. This game is Topalov Anand from Bilbao 2008. This position has been played once after that. This is a Queen's Indian defense. You can see that black has pawns on b6 and c5, and this arises after move 15 for white in this position. After bishop takes c3, white recaptures with the pawn. The reason why white recaptures with the pawn is you want to basically stop the move d4. And after knight a6, knight h4, g6, knight d5. As I said, this has been played once after that. Bishop d5, castles, and of course rook a to d1 controlling the file. White has a pleasant edge, even though the material is equal. And the only reason for white's small advantage is the control over the open file. Now, let's play smart moves for black. Of course, we know that Vishy Anand is a very strong player, so he understands what's going on. And black's hopes in this position are knight c7, knight e6. And after knight e6, you want to go rook to d8, control the file, and basically trade off the pieces and argue that you have a better position because you have a 3-2 pawn majority on the queen side, and white has a ruined pawn structure. So if that actually happens, then black is better. Okay, but there's a long way to that. So knight c7, preparing knight e6, the rook is attacked, so rook to d7. The most active move. You, of course, don't want to retreat. And knight to e6. And in this position, Veselin Topalov played an incredible move, queen to e4. Now, this move stops rook to d8. If you play rook to d8, you lose. It's quite complicated, but I'll show you how. So let's say you play rook to d8, trying to challenge the open file. Well, in this position, rook takes d8. If you take with the queen, you lose the queen, so knight takes d8. And now queen to e8 check, king to g7, and after rook to d7, you can resign. If you wait, well, everything is defended for the moment. But if you wait with, let's say, rook to b8, then knight to f3, and the position is crushing. You are jumping into one of these two squares, and black is basically forced to give up his queen. And there is nothing better in this position. Because if you move the knight, trying to trade off, then you lose on f7. So the move queen to e4 stops rook to d8. For the moment, Topalov is controlling everything. He is controlling the file. Black's king side is compromised. Black's knight is the only good piece in the position. You could argue that black's queen and rooks aren't really playing. So he plays the move queen to e8, which, I mean, this move is designed to prepare rook a to d8 Okay, so you want to keep control over the f7 square, you are stopping queen to e8 check, and you are leaving your rook on f8. So in this position, if white does nothing, rook a to d8, and again, black is equal. But now an incredible move, knight to f3. And after knight to f3, well, there's just nothing he can do. Okay, c4 was played. Queen to h4 was played, and I'll show you the threat. Let's say rook to b8 is played, which is a passive move. Let's say rook to b8. The threat is queen to h6, and after, let's say, rook to a8, let's just give him another stupid move, rook to d4. And in this position, if you take the rook, then of course knight g5 wins. If you don't take the rook, let's say you wait again, then rook to h4, and there is absolutely no defense to this idea. So after the move queen to h4, Anand had to react. He played knight c5, attacking the rook and trying to, well, prevent white's attacking ideas, but now just rook to e7, attacking the queen. And in this position, if, let's say, queen to a4, attacking the pawns, then rook to d6 should be sufficient for a huge advantage. Let's say queen to c2, trying to run back to the defense or win this pawn or whatever. Then knight g5, h5, and queen to f4, and of course, this is too much pressure in the position. It's not an easy win in one move, but you can see that all of white's pieces are in play. White's king is perfectly safe, black's king is completely compromised. So after rook to e7, Anand continued rook to d8. So if you take my queen, I take both your rooks, of course. So if rook e8, then rook d1 check, king g2, and rook e8. So in this position, just rook f1 played. And believe it or not, Vishy Anand resigned. Why did he resign? Well, let's say you try queen c6, trying to get away from the attack. Again, knight g5, h5, you have to defend, but in this position, knight takes f7, and the position is busted. Rook takes f7, king takes f7, and queen takes d8. And of course, white is an exchange up, and the pawn up, easily winning. So, what went wrong in that position? After knight c7, which is a good move, rook d7, which is the only move, knight e6, which is the only move, queen e4, well, probably a better try was c4, with the idea of the eventual knight c5 and trying to fight for control of the key squares. Now, I'm not sure if this would be sufficient, but black would probably have enough counterplay with this move. After queen to e8, of course, and knight to f3, c4 was too late to play c4. Queen e8 was just a wasted move. The f8 rook is not doing anything. The move knight f3 vacated the h4 square and also prepared knight g5 and knight e5, and white was after knight f3 basically tactically winning. c4, queen h4, and no way to stop either queen h6 or the other threats that happened in the game after knight c5, rook e7. Okay, let's move on. The next game is very interesting. In this position, Alexander Alekhine was playing Borislav Kostic in Bled in 1931. Bled is in Slovenia, a very popular tournament destination. They still hold tournaments today. There is an open tournament in Bled every July, I believe. I've never played it, but I planned to several times. So in this position, Alekhine has the white pieces. He plays the only move, of course, queen to c3. Queen to c2 is also playable, but queen to c3 is slightly more active. So queen to c3, why queen to c3? You want to stop rook to c8. Okay. So in this position, rook to d8 played. And now knight e5 played. Taking the knight would give a very strong square for the white pieces on d4, and also would mean tactically that the move e6 leads to checkmate always. So queen to c3 is slightly more active because it creates this battery and makes knight e5 a very strong move. After knight e5, of course, f6 would be very passive and weaken your king significantly. So that's not a move you really want to play. Okay, so after knight e5, knight d7 played, challenging the knight again. And now in this position, Alechin plays a very strong move. And I would like to talk about this move for a while. So here, White's control of the open C file is superficial. And White, again, doesn't have good infiltration points. The only good infiltration point is the C6 square, which is most probably going to have to be occupied with the knight. And of course, rook to c8 at some point is a possibility. For the moment, after knight d7, rook c8 is a tactical problem because the knight will be hanging. But in this position, Alechin plays a great move, b4. What does this move do? Well, first of all, this move controls the c5 square for the moment. Second of all, it gives the bishop the option to reroute to this diagonal, which could be very significant. But most importantly, it prepares the move b5. And after the move b5, White will have created an outpost on c6, which can then be utilized throughout the game and cannot be challenged enough times because Black doesn't have a light squared bishop. The only way to challenge it would be with the knight or with the rooks, but challenging it with the knight would require you to play knight b8, which again relieves control over the c file. So in this position, rook a to c8 is not possible, and let's show why. Let's say you play rook a to c8. In this position, just queen to b3, attacking the pawn, and of course threatening tactics here. So let's say you play rook takes c1, rook takes c1, and if you go rook to c8, then knight takes d7. So again, White would be controlling the file. He would be able to play moves like rook to c6 and b5, and again trying to occupy the position. So after queen to b3, rook a to c8 is not possible. Borislav Kostic played the move b5, which I agree with. b5 is a good move. If b5 isn't played by Black, then b5 will be played by White, and the knight will have a permanent outpost. But now we come to the second issue, the second threat White had. If you stop me from creating an outpost, I can still infiltrate. So doubling the rooks on the open files with tempo, with rook to c6. Of course, in this position, bishop takes knight fails to rook takes queen, and you don't have enough, definitely, for the queen. So queen to b7 played. And now the only sensible move, rook a to c1. And again, material is equal, position is still balanced, and White doesn't have a practical advantage here. White doesn't have a practical advantage. White is not winning. White is not much better. The assessment should be equal or balanced. Imbalanced position-wise by balanced when you look at balanced when you look at the continuation. But White is controlling the open file. White's rooks are way more active. White has the control. Therefore, White's position is much easier to play. In this position, again, rook a to c8 wouldn't really be such a good move because of queen to c3, keeping control of the open file. You don't want to take, of course, relinquishing control. And after rook c6, queen c6, queen c6, rook c6 again. Our position is very dominant. Bishop b4, of course, fails to rook takes f6. And you can see that in this pawn structure, White is the one holding all the cards, and White will basically pick off the weaknesses on d5, b5, and a7. So rook a to c8, again, not possible. Kostic played a5, trying to complicate things on the queen side. But now a great move from Alechin. He plays bishop a3. And this move, well, prepares for the opening of the diagonal. So if the pawn is taken, then bishop takes increases the control over the position and, of course, attacks the knight laterally by discovery. So here, finally, Kostic plays rook a to c8, which is a blunder. Okay, this is just a blunder that loses material, as we are going to show. After bishop a3, a good move would have been a4, a move which makes a lot of sense. It's a compromise, and after something like queen to c2, keeping control of the file, Alechin is, of course, much better. Alechin is in complete control of the position, and Kostic has two incredibly weak pawns. But this would have been survivable and still holdable. Imbalanced, but Black has something to play for. Instead of that rook a to c8 played, and now after b takes a5, attacking the bishop twice, you are in trouble. So there is no easy solution. I think Kostic played the best move, b4, attacking the bishop, but of course the bishop cannot be taken because the queen is hanging. And it's a practical decision to save the d6 bishop, to not have to move it. But now a6, gaining a tempo on the queen, queen to a8, and queen to c2. Again, controlling the c file. If you in this position take my bishop, then I win a rook, with rook takes c8. So Kostic tried rook takes c6, trying to trade off the pieces and then win the bishop. But now after knight takes c6, your exchange is attacked, or your rook is attacked. So if you try b takes a3, then knight d8, and if you count the material, black has bishop, knight, and queen. White has queen, rook, and knight. And after queen takes a6, queen c6, queen c6, rook c6, and after queen takes knight, I believe that we just queen our pawn with queen to c6. There is no stopping the promotion in this position, so you cannot win the knight. So after knight takes c6, taking the bishop is not possible. So we have rook to d7, saving the rook, but now simply bishop takes b4 or knight takes b4 would win. Queen takes a6, knight to b8, forking an exchange, bishop takes, queen c8 check. Queen c8, rook c8 check, king g7, and bishop f8. And after rook takes b8, the game is basically over. White has an extremely powerful passed pawn on the queen side, and his open file control brought him basically a winning endgame. This is move 31. Kostic resigned on move 47. Still requires some technique, but it's not difficult. Okay, let's move on to the last game. This game shows complete domination over the entire queen side, and just watch what happens with the c8 bishop and with the b8 rook. This is an incredible display of domination of a complete side of the board. I was very happy when I saw this game for the first time. Okay, so here, of course, the only sensible move, rook h to d1. And now already, black's position is very hard to play. White is, of course, threatening to play the move rook to d8. Developing your bishop in this position is really not so easy. Because, well, you are blocking the rest of your pieces. Let's just see what happens. I actually haven't engine checked this position, but I want to see what happens on bishop e6. Okay, excuse me. Yeah, okay. This pattern occurred later on in the game, but I wasn't sure if it worked here. Okay, so the idea is if you try to develop your bishop, I take, you take, and I take here, and after I take one of your rooks, then I can infiltrate, and I'm getting two pieces and two pawns for an exchange and a completely dominant position. So you cannot develop your bishop. Sorry about checking that, but better safe than a blunder. I don't know. Okay, so rook h to d1. In this position, Lev Polugaevsky, this is the game Vasily Smyslov versus Lev Polugaevsky from the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal, played in 1970. In this position, Lev Polugaevsky played f6, trying to give his king a square when the infiltration happens. I analyzed the move f5, and I think this is slightly more active after rook to d8. Rook takes d8, rook takes d8, check, king to f7, because you have an additional square for your king, and your bishop is protected. So this is slightly more active. Instead of that, f6 played. And now rook to d8. The rooks weren't exchanged, king f7 played instead. That was the idea behind f6 and f5. But now rook e8, king e8, and bishop a3. Now this is an incredible move. This is again same as in the Alekhine-Kostic example. White is controlling the open file, but there is no practical way to utilize the advantage with the open file itself. Instead of that, Control over the open file often gives you control over key squares. So in this position, the move bishop a3 was incredible because it looks at the weakened d6 square. And first of all, you chase the rook away. Secondly, as we are going to see, Vasilis Myslov is going to prepare bishop c7. And bishop c7, again, reinforces the d8 square and gives your other rook the option to infiltrate. So bishop a3 is a very deep move, but these are the kinds of moves I would like to learn from Grandmaster games. So bishop a3, if you don't understand it, then it looks like a very stupid move. But if you understand what he's trying to do, then bishop d6, bishop c7 is very powerful, completely dominating the queen side. In this position, knight d5 was played, and that's not really a pawn sacrifice because your h3 pawn is hanging, so of course Myslov didn't release the pressure with bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and let's say bishop e6, rook d2, and bishop h3. This would be almost completely equal. White is still slightly better, but black has the bishop pair. The king isn't really as exposed when the rook is now able to control d8, and this position should be fine. So after knight d5, a very dominating, almost sadistic move, bishop d6, of course continuing with his plan, and after rook a8, simply c4, chasing the knight away. The knight is very good on d5, basically killing the control of the open file and making the fact that white is controlling the open file completely insignificant, so let's remove the knight. The knight jumps into e7, which is a problematic square because it restrains the black king. And now bishop to c7. Of course, you cannot develop your bishop now because I take. And then I have a check here, so there's nothing you can do. In this position, f5 played, which I think should have been played earlier, as I said. But now rook to d8. And after king to f7, look at black's queen side. Look at the c8 bishop, look at the a8 rook. Now, next move, again, incredible. Very instructive. Try to pause the video and find the next move for white. Okay, this is a subtle move. There are no sacrifices here, no checkmates. Smyslov plays c5. Now c5 is designed to simply reinforce the control over d6, to cramp black's queen side even more, to make b6 harder to play because the weakness on c6 is fixed, and to make d6 a permanent outpost. So even if black manages to untangle, then the bishop is going to be on d6 for the rest of the game. And if captured, then knight c4 is an additional weapon. So the move c5 I just thought was remarkable. This is a sort of clearance move that I hardly ever find during games, and I always try to maneuver my pieces into squares which are currently available. Noticing opportunities for freeing up squares for my pieces, even if that includes a pawn sacrifice, is very hard for me. So this move controls the queen side, makes d6 an outpost, prepares knight c4, and when knight d6 comes, black is in dire straits. Knight d5 played, of course, there is a downside to every pawn move. You are weakening d5 again, but yeah, now the pieces are in. Bishop d6 on an outpost. Bishop f6 played in this position, attacking the rook. Rook to f8 check, king to g7, and now knight to c4. And how does black develop? Black is still playing 2 pieces down. Black is 2 pieces down. Okay, if after king g7 you try bishop d5, then after c takes d5, b4, this was also a very good way to play, trying to trade advantages. This is simply trying to win with the 3-2 pawn majority, which is still a huge advantage because black still doesn't have a way to develop. But what Smyslov did was, I think, better. Knight c4 is just more sadistic and more Karpov style, just controlling the entire board, not allowing your opponent to breathe, not trading off the pieces. In this position, e4 was tried by Lev Polugevsky. F3, undermining, e takes f3, bishop takes f3. Of course, you don't take with the pawn, stopping the activation of your bishop. Bishop g5 check, king to d1, knight to c3 check, king to e1. Nothing is really going on here. If you take the pawn, well, then simply rook to e8. and I'll show you the threat. Let's say a stupid move is played here. Let's say h6 is played. Then there is a very serious threat of mate with bishop e5 check, bishop f6, and in this position rook to e7, in which case you lose your bishop. And if after bishop e5 check you play king h7, then of course rook to h8 is checkmate. So knight to a2 is, I mean, a passive move. What happened in the game is not much better. Knight to b5 played. And now again, rook to e8 played with the same idea. Let's give a slightly better move to black. I think h6 is just a horrible move because it makes this threat even stronger. Let's say a6 is played. Now bishop e5 again. And now in this position you can play king f7. And now rook to h8, infiltrating, let's say king to e6, trying to escape, rook to e8, check, king to f7. You can repeat, you can win this pawn, you can do whatever you want. If you win this pawn, he's going to develop, so maybe just leaving the rook on e8 could be better, but yeah, maybe just converting with rook takes h7 is okay. But after rook to e8, black correctly played king to f7 immediately, without wasting time. And now rook to h8, bishop to f6, and now knight to e5 check, king to g7, rook back to e8, complete domination, not allowing the pieces to develop. After h5, e3, stopping all counterplay, knight c3, knight takes c6, and we are not going to go forward. A couple of more moves were played. I can just show you the game quickly to its conclusion. So takes, bishop takes, and of course here the pawn is going to promote. I don't want to focus on the tactical features of this position. You can see it yourself. Just Google Vasily Smyslov, Lev Polugaevsky, 1970, Palma de Mallorca. An incredible game. Yeah, so I hope these 4 examples helped. I hope they gave you some new ideas of how to play with open files and showed you that the control of an open file is very important, but in itself it's not a practical advantage. You need either strong squares on the open file or you need infiltration points on the open files. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you got something from this video. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.